Thank you, Mr. Grohl. Isn't it amazing that after all this time doing morning coffee, that Dave Grohl still takes time to come down from LA every single Sunday just to do that bit? Thanks, Dave. Hey, guys, what's going on? Welcome to the show. Oh, my God. Look at everybody. JT, what's up, buddy? Cutthroat's here. Bat Stan. Okay. We're going to do something a bit different. So we're going to do some toy talk today. And I got a good buddy of mine. We're going to get into his experiences because he's had quite a bit of experiences in his life, a lot that I wished I had, both throughout the 80s and definitely in the 90s. We're going to talk to our buddy Jordan. Let's get him on now. And we were just talking backstage about Ghostbusters. What's up, Jordan?
Hey, good morning.
How you doing, mate?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Good. I'm just, what we were talking about before, just trying to take it all in when we have another pop culture franchise, a beloved pop culture franchise being regurgitated over and over again. But I've learned to kind of maybe not get so emotional
it's tough
about it. Maybe
it's tough. It's like I've always said, it's like spending time with the reanimated corpse of a best friend. Seems cool to see them again, but it's not quite the same.
Yeah, and the few reviews that I did watch are by Ghostbuster super fans, and they say the same thing. You know what? It's flawed here, but above all that, I'm just glad we're getting another Ghostbusters. We're just thankful we're getting. I'm like that, and that's the problem, is that you'll just kind of take anything. But anyway, we were talking about that. We were talking about Star Wars 2 over texting the other day. Maybe we'll get into a bit of that. But before we stay in the present and go to the future, let's talk about the past. Now, Jordan, why don't you introduce yourself for people who don't know you? Or I had a few people message me, who's Jordan? Who's this guy? Who's this guy? So you can introduce yourself to everyone.
Oh, okay.
Stand up, please. I'm just kidding.
Yes. Okay. I'm not prepared. Yep, my name is Jordan Morris. I currently work as a screenwriting coach and mentor for new and emerging screenwriters. But back in the day, I was hired at what became the world's busiest Toys R Us in my hometown of London, Ontario, Canada. It was the first store in Canada, which explained why it got to be the busiest store in the world. And I went from being a seasonal employee to a regular part-time employee to a department head, and then became responsible for training the first management teams for the first English stores, like opening a store in England, and the first German stores, which was
wow. I had no idea that it went that far with Toys R Us. Maybe we talked about it one of those days in the long rides in the van, but
yeah,
it's certainly interesting. So what year did you start at Toys R Us?
Somewhere around 86, 85, 86, somewhere in there. It was opened in the late summer, very early fall in preparation for the first Christmas season. And I applied for it when it first opened, and I had like blue hair and an earring and stuff like that. So the very tightly wound Chicago team that came up to open the store didn't want to have anything to do with me. So
well, you're a little punk, that's why.
Yeah. And but then during this full swing of the Christmas season, the store got out of hand really quickly, and they needed additional staff members. So the Chicago team went back home, and the new local management team was in charge of hiring the second round for just help. and I came in, and I will never forget it. It was super funny because I'd removed the earring, I got smart, and I didn't have any color in my hair. I just came in looking as normal as I possibly could. And I can't remember the guy, but he looked at me. He said, "Are you afraid of heights?" I said, "No." He says, "Are you okay on a ladder?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Okay, you start Monday." That was it.
Wow. How things have changed compared to today's job market. That's insane. That's the you know what? That's the way it should be. You just go with your gut instinct. When I was managing retail, I did that a lot. I would have the little questions, but they usually went to the side, and I would have just a conversation because you could tell a lot. Someone's not looking at you or they're fidgeting. It's like, do I really want this person on staff? It's
Yeah, they
really
needed
neat.
people that were strong, like relatively strong. You couldn't be awkward. You couldn't be afraid of heights because this place was busy. We'll get into it, but it was beyond like reason how busy this place was, how fast everything moved, and everything was stocked up to the rafters. And this is a warehouse style. These are the old school style Toys R Us stores, the big, big, big ones. So you were way up there when you had to climb up to the top to find stuff in the warehouse and elsewhere. They just needed people who were basically big human monkeys that could do all this stuff and keep up with the pace. So I was down with that, and then immediately won them over enough to become regular staff, and then I'll talk to you about how my OCD helped me kind of impress them enough that I started doing training and stuff like that for them as
Wow.
well.
I remember I think this is accurate. The big blue mobile ladders, correct? That were stairs with
Yeah,
the
we call them
railing.
staircases. Yeah, they
Yeah,
were
yeah.
supposed to stay in the warehouse, but we brought them out onto the floor when you're putting up big stuff like the flag play set or something like that. We'd need that staircase to be able to pull it off.
Oh, I'm so excited. That's so exciting. Rob's here. Good to see you, man. Jordan
Hey,
is a frequent collaborator with stuff I'm involved with Rob as well. Jordan produced Nintendo Quest. Of course, he produced Dress Up, which is the latest doc that is winning all these awards, nominated for all these awards. So congrats again to you and Rob. You can watch it on Amazon. One of the best documentaries I've seen, and I'm not just saying that because these guys are my buddies. I legitimately was there for the screening in London. I teared up at all the right spots, and it pulled on the heartstrings. And it's just a wonderful film.
yeah, thanks, man.
And Nintendo Quest is pretty good too. Anyways,
It was. It was. I make a brief appearance in that one as well. Somehow I keep kind of appearing on screen for these things, which is not the idea, but it happens anyway.
well, we always call you. Hey, we're gonna do the toy one, and you're like, no, come on, man, come on. You're like, I don't know. Then we just end up in your house anyway. It's like we're coming over whether you want to or not. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's how it goes. We're gonna go through a ranking of the top 10 toys as of 2020. So this is when the pandemic hit. So this is like the feel good article. I don't know what the rhyme or reason is, but we'll go through that and we'll talk about each toy line. So what was your motivation besides money to get a job at Toys R Us? Were you a toy collector? Were you into video games? All the good stuff?
Yeah, you need a job. So I had to get a job, and I was having trouble finding a place to work that didn't drive me crazy. Wasn't about to do regular corporate stuff. And yeah, I was a huge toy collector. Loved it, loved pop culture, loved all that stuff. So I thought, well, this maybe this will work out. I can just surround myself with the things that I'm interested in. And I got really lucky because I ended up becoming the department head for the 300s. And the 300s aisles were where all the TV toys were. So like,
The good toys. The
yeah,
one aisle that you always go down. You go like this as you're walking by the aisles, and you're like, oh, there's the Transformers or whatever. That's all the good stuff. What used to be in one aisle back in
yeah,
the
it was two aisles in that store. Action figures were two aisles, and then end caps. A little bit spilled into a third. Like my favorite monster, or my pet monster, sorry, was in a third aisle. So that was like bigger than action figures, but not quite dolls. And then Barbie, prams, and strollers, all that stuff. Gem. It was a whole entire series of aisles, and it was Hot Wheels was on the far end, die cast, all that kind of stuff. So all of those toys, the hottest toys that were demanded every Christmas season, were in that section of the store known as the 300s.
Okay, so you joined in 1980. You joined the Toys R Us team in 1986. Wow, I mean,
Yeah, 5, 6. It might have been an 85. I can't remember when it opened. And because that chain is collapsed, there's almost no records. I mean, we've still got Toys R Us stores here in Canada, which is crazy. They brought them back, but they're much smaller now. They're a very different animal than they were. But there's almost no like surviving history for this store. Our store was either number 504 or 506. I think it was 506. TRU 506 was on all the documents and all that stuff. And I don't know where that number came from. Was it literally the 506th store that they built? Because maybe. I know Canada's biggest toy chain, which I went to after Toys R Us, never cracked 100 locations, even at their best.
Let
But
me chime in on that. As you guys know, I was a manager at EB Games for 20 years, my whole time there, and our stores started at 800. So if that's it, there probably wasn't 400, right? It might have started at whatever, like 821, I think was the first one ever in London, and that was the 21st store. So
huh,
I don't know
well,
if that's
there were
any good.
definitely more than 6 stores, so I don't know what
Yeah,
the nomenclature was like for that, but I did get to learn a lot of their systems, like they used SKU numbers, what some people call skin numbers, stop keeping unit number, and that had information buried in the numbers. You could tell what department it was and that kind of stuff from those
right.
numbers. I learned all that, but I never figured out exactly why the store was called 506.
If you started in 1985/1986, you would have dealt with the USS Flag, which is something that I talk about way too much. I'm
Oh
just
yeah,
thinking of
yeah.
specific toys, and I have one in my collection, and I swear to God to you, dude, every single day I walk down beside it, I always just like graze it with my fingers. I'm like, this thing is friggin' amazing. It's like the best thing ever. I seem to remember, I don't know if this is just my messed up memory, but was the flag ever on a top shelf, or am I just imagining this? Do you remember that at all, or was it low?
No, well, it could be. It depends on the store, but ours were high, and um, because the display models were hung above the aisles, parallel to the shelves.
Yeah,
There was a steel pipe that ran down the entire length of the aisle with supports up to the ceiling. And then we would have pieces of pegboard about this wide with hooks, like again, steel tubes that went up and wrapped over that bar that went left and right. And you would hang the display units on that. And then from below that, there was the pouch with the tags that you would pull.
right.
So for the big items, you'd have to pull a tag and you'd walk up to the front and pay for it at the cash. And then you'd drive around to the back of the store and they'd shove it in your car and you'd go away. Like you didn't walk out with it under your arm ever.
Sure, sure.
The flag was way too big. I don't remember ever assembling one of those. I believe we just put the box up so that you could see the giant box and that wouldn't get in the way of all the other kind of merch directly below it.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing one. I never saw one until, well, my buddy in high school had one. Obviously, we're too old to play with toys then, but he still had one assembled like in his basement. It was just kind of sitting there collect dust. But yeah, you can't, once it's assembled, you can't move it, right? So there's no way a store would not survive, right? It would be destroyed easily. Um, Cutthroat says, it was said when they made the Toys R Us into Babies R Us. Well, that's a division of Toys R Us, but those didn't take the place of Toys R Us. What happened was Babies R Us would take a good chunk of the store footing, but there might be separate Babies R Us locations, but it was just kind of them expanding, I think. Hey, Jim, how you doing, buddy?
I remember the Babies R Us appearing because their market share in mainstream toys, because the entire toy industry was cratering. That was a
Right.
survival maneuver on their part. They were safe and they were having good, strong sales in baby merchandise, but toys were caving in.
Jim says usually a store's first number is zone filled by the number of stores. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, but it didn't
Interesting.
work that way because we were the first store in our zone in our entire country, but we were store 506. So
Yeah, that
that,
is weird.
again, that doesn't figure into whatever the heck our store was. Like maybe we were part of the zone that the Chicago team came from. They just made Canada part of that. I don't know. They never explained it to me. I could never figure that out.
Maybe they just gave it the number because they're testing the waters. I don't know. They're like, well, we'll see if this survives in Canada. I remember that one on Wellington. That was always a destination. I was way too young to be able to go there on my own. So I relied on my mom and my grandma. And when we went there, it was an event. But we'll get to that. Toys R Us now is not what it once was. I have one just down the street. Jordan, you have one too, just down the street from you. And I don't know if you've been in one lately.
Nah. I
It's
went in when they first came back. I walked through and I was like, this is not the thing, and I've never been back.
yeah. I mean, they don't carry video games anymore. They pulled the video games out of Toys R Us. It's just, I mean, the stuff is stocked well with current toys, with current company like NECA, Super 7, stuff like that, but it's all $15-$20 more, a lot of it. So the new like Indiana Jones 6-inch stuff during Christmas, they blew them all out like 50% because they're $5-$10 for those, more than anywhere else, and then they just all get liquidated. It's like, what are you guys doing? Oh, you're counting on the fact that the States doesn't have Toys R Us, and this is a big nostalgic trip for everybody, so we'll jack it up like it's a specialty store. Gotcha. That
Yeah.
also explains why it's filled all the time, because nobody's buying anything. I don't know how they're still around, dude, because I go in there once in a while. But it's this weird sterile environment. None of the employees look like they're enjoying themselves. It's just a job, like a lot of like teens, early 20s there, which is fine, a good starter job, but they don't look like they're having any fun. It's just kind of like a kind of dead kind of air about it. I don't know, it's an uncomfortable store to go into now.
Well, even the old school Toys R Us's weren't necessarily a fun place to be, but they were super fun because they were such an important destination for so many people. It was the activity level going on in there, and of course the fact that they were displaying the toys that we now all love and we're fondly remembering. But it was no more fun to work for corporate management back in the day than it is right now.
Right.
It was crazy busy, crazy busy. This was the peak of brick and mortar retail, when I went in, and it could have been as early as '84. I don't remember. And I remember the growth of the computer games too, the video game section, because
Mhm.
it was one aisle and it became three by the time I was gone. Like they kept expanding it. It just kept
Well,
growing.
you would have been there before Nintendo had come to America. So you would have been dealing with,
Nintendo was one of the first ones on display. Yeah.
so it would have been 86 then probably. I'm not saying when you worked, I'm just putting the timelines together, because 85 it was still the remnants of Atari and Coleco, and nobody wanted any of that stuff. It was dead, right? Um and then yeah, Nintendo. And by the way, for all you guys out there, I don't know if you knew this, for all you guys out there who watch Nintendo Quest, Jordan is also the narrator during the section about Nintendo coming to America, the part I'm talking about right now. So isn't that kind of funny? There you
Ha ha ha! Says Nintendo.
go. He's the guy. Chad, thank you for the $10 super chat, buddy. Much appreciated. Hi, good morning, Bardo. Love you. Jordan, great to see you. Chad, you're always awesome. Very kind of you, dude. Thank you for the support. Appreciate that. Impossible Pie says, a worker at Toys R Us in Windsor, Ontario, Canada told me the reason they don't sell video games anymore is because they can't mark them up. Video game companies control the prices.
Yep, makes sense.
I know at EB Games we couldn't mark them up. No, it was reverse. We couldn't put the used game too much lower than the new, because then the new game wouldn't sell, and then Nintendo and Sony and whoever would get mad, right? So it was almost the reverse. But yeah, I think they're universally priced. That's weird that they have something on that you can't set your own prices for it. Interesting.
Back in the day, they were cutting deals with the big manufacturers too, like Mattel and Hasbro would actually buy sections in the store, and they would dictate how things were displayed, and they would have a lot to say about the prices set as well. Like it was a really different environment back then.
Christoph says, "Cheers, Mr. Jordan Morris." Cheers
Cheers.
indeed. Okay, so why don't we go through some of the big toy lines? And I already noticed, actually, there's an error, as this picture of He-Man is from the Origins collection from 2020, but that's okay. I don't know if these are in order or what kind of order they're in, dude. We're just gonna kind of go through them here. So number 10, we have Muscles. Do you remember Muscles?
Of course I do. I remember it stands for millions of unusual small creatures lurking everywhere.
Who could forget the little weird wrestler men that came from the plastic trash can Muscles, a toy line that consists of Myra, little toy men who had an eraser type feel to them. Yeah, they were almost like a PVC, weird kind of solid plastic. Um,
I remember box sets too, not just in the cans, but you could get a box set where they were all displayed facing outward, so you knew what you're getting. That came later because I think some of the complaints were that they didn't know what they were buying. But yeah, that they were popular and they held popularity for quite a while, a lot longer than you'd think.
since you were working at retail at the time, your opinion is very important here. So you can agree or disagree with any of these on the list. Okay. Muscles, I had a few. I wasn't really into them, but I mean, I was blessed from my mom to have everything pretty much. So these guys weren't top priority on the list. I think I just didn't get it. I get it more now, but were these hot sellers? Do you remember?
Yeah, they were solid sellers. They were not ever, the peak. They were never the hot item, but they just sold nice and steady. So they were a win. And whomever kind of greenlit that line deserves some credit because it doesn't look like it should be anything that should work. It doesn't look like something that would ever go over, but for some reason it did. And they were relatively cheap and plentiful, and you could have an army of them in a snap. So there was play value there.
They look like vending machine or almost a little dollar store. Not dollar store, little vending machines with the balls that we used to put the quarter in and get the toy out of it. The gumball machines, that's it. They kind of look like that, but there's a lot of detail in each and every one of these figures, a crazy amount of detail.
Yeah,
in
I
my
agree. I
opinion.
don't know if they were transplanted from a Japanese line or something like that, or where they came from. I don't remember that, but it wouldn't surprise me because you'd think that if a toy line like that came out of North America, they wouldn't bother with that kind of detail. Like
Yeah, it's may not be apparent to fans of the toy line in the West, but in Japan, these guys had a rich history.
there
Muscle
you go.
was originally a toy line from the manga and anime series Kinu Kumra Man, very popular shonen series in Japan. There you go.
That makes perfect sense to me. Yeah, I
There you
didn't actually remember that, but of course it is. Yeah, because if you think about the difference in quality between the Galoob Robotech toys and the original Japanese Robotech toys, it was like miles apart.
I still
So,
love the Robotechs. Those are awesome. And do you well, you remember, of course, when they came out, the Veritech Fighter couldn't transform because Hasbro had the rights
yeah,
to the Veritech. So Jetfire could transform, but the Matchbox Robotech could not. And you can even see where they put the pin because I don't want to say it could, but there's parts of it that still look like the legs could come down, but they stopped it.
yeah, I hated those. Again, the North American toy line for Robotech was really lame. They were really, really low quality. And the greatest transforming toy, in my humble opinion, was not a transformer. It was by Gakken, and it was the Mospeda, which was the Robotech Cyclones from Series 3, what we knew as the third
Dude,
series of Robotech.
you're talking my language. That's Scott Bernard's Cyclone, man. That's my favorite. One of my favorite toys is the Matchbox one, which doesn't transform, but we got that standalone. You know the one I'm talking about, that beautiful baby blue. We got the standalone Cyclone and Scott Bernard. God, dude, it's like
The Gekken
nostalgia.
one was this big, though, and it looked perfect. I'm not exaggerating. It looked perfect in both forms, as a suit of armor on the figure and as a motorcycle on its own. Like, it was amazing. It took me an hour to transform it the first time I tried it because it was so complex, and then obviously you got better with it. But there were so many tiny little moving parts. It was not really made for kids as far as North American sensibilities went. But I snagged one of those the second I got it, and it's still to this day one of my favorite toys ever. And I say the greatest transforming toy ever designed.
Because that had the Cyclone would actually go on the pilot,
It
whereas
looked it looked perfect in both forms, and that was rare.
right the Matchbox one, the Scott Bernard action figure, although he looks badass, it's this weird like if you take the Cyclone, because they were sold separately, so if you take the Cyclone out of the equation, it's like the armor is half on him from the Cyclone, but it's half off. So you get this really weird. And I mean, as a kid, I didn't know anything about Robotech, so I didn't care. I just thought that he looked friggin' awesome. He had blue hair, and I was like, oh my God, this is like the best thing ever. Still one
Yeah.
of my favorite toys, but
Yeah, look for it. Look for it's called the Mospiata, Mospeada, I think is the name they gave it to, but that's what we
yeah.
called the Cyclone. That was by Gekin or Gakin, I can't remember. That was a nice big box. That was a really beautiful toy, really well engineered. Hard to find now though.
So awesome. So awesome. Thundercats by LJN is number 9 on the list. So far, the top 10 toy lines of all the 80s. I don't know if I agree with number 10. Number 9, I don't know. Should Thundercats be in there? Think about everything that we got. Do you think this deserves to be in number 9? I don't know.
It sold really well. It performed really well. Yeah, it was never He-Man level of success, but it had a good solid run for at least a couple of years. That was interesting, like watching the toys become really popular and then fade out because I worked there for several years. That was interesting to me. And Thundercats died before He-Man, of course, but they had a really strong run.
The cartoon show is phenomenal. The animation, especially in the intro of that show, is second to none in my opinion. It's just absolutely incredible. A lot of the shortcomings that I have with the Filmation He-Man is the rotoscoping animation, how it's just reused over and over and over again. And as a kid, you don't care, but if you're watching it later on in your adult years, it's kind of like, eh. With Thundercats, everything is completely original, hand drawn from the ground up. Um, I like the characters. The toys for me in the vintage Thundercats aren't that great. They're okay. But I would say I don't know. We'll continue on the list. I don't know if this should have a place in the top 10.
Part of the
Uh,
reason they did well is that they were durable too. Like some of these toys that we're going to talk
yeah,
about probably fell apart in your hands. Like Megatron was notoriously a terrible, terrible toy.
it's
Uh,
bad.
but for to be a popular kids toy, it's got to be punishable. And Thundercats held up. They did okay.
Christoph. Yep, we understand you, buddy. Christoph is coming to us from Poland. You're always worried about your English, buddy. You're doing just fine. We understand you perfectly. Absolutely. Mikey's here. JMK Custom Works. Good to see you, Mikey. Star Wars. I'm sure Star Wars is going to be on here, Jim. Absorb Vids. Good morning, my friend. Good to see you. Thundercats figures had some cool ideas like the power ring battery light up eyes for Lion-O.
Yep.
Yeah. And they had the Battlematic action, which was first seen the LJN Advanced Dungeons and Dragons figures. The second wave got the little flick. I don't know, man. Were you ever into that stuff? I didn't care about power action or any of that stuff. I just wanted a cool figure.
I was always impressed by the innovation. Like I was collecting at this point, but not playing with them like you were when they were released. So I liked when they came up with an action I'd never seen before, or some kind of thing like magnetic pieces, or like the Darkseid character just having the opening in his head so the light could come through and make his eyes glow. Super simple, but really effective when you were looking straight in his face, and it would never break. Right? These are not features that would ever fail you. They would work
Right.
forever. So I appreciated that kind of stuff.
Show is great. Again, Thundercats. I still watch it here and there today. Oh no.
Speak of the devil.
So as I go on and on about the Frozen Throne, the Frozen Empire, the Frozen Chair, whatever the new one is called, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I say, oh, Ghostbusters was so pure. It wasn't about the equipment. It was always about the guys. But very soon after we got that first movie, we got the real Ghostbusters cartoon, which a lot of people are actually saying the new movie feels like an episode from the cartoon, which is not necessarily bad, but it's
Nope.
kind of just there.
Yeah, Freak of the Week set up and roll. And if they keep going, that's probably the formula they're going to use, and it's a good one. So yeah, that toy line was really strong, super hot for a while, but it didn't last like some of the more iconic ones either, like He-Man. He-Man just had staying power that was unlike
It,
anything else.
it got super, super silly. And Ghostbusters came out in 86, George, so it would have been right there for you.
Yeah.
The first wave is great. The Four Guys and Slimer, State Puff, Ecto 1. I think that was it. And then we got the Toilet Ghost and the Granny one, which I thought were all fine. But then you get into the characters with the scare features, the fright features.
Right. I
Um,
remember those. Yeah.
and I know Rob, if Rob's still here, he'll argue till he's blue in the face because he loves that stuff. I thought it killed it for me. You know, Venkman's eyes would pop out because he was scared. It was just like it's not my thing. So I collected, much like Turtles. I like the first little wave, the first blast
Well,
of the
yeah,
characters.
that's where the concept is it's purist, right? But they can't let that you can only do that for one season. And then they got to come back and try to figure out how to reinvigorate the line. So like
Yeah.
in storytelling, when we're talking about creating something that's going to be a TV series, then you've got to have a concept or what they sometimes call an engine, a story engine that'll go for 100 episodes. It's not just about one problem or like one cool episode. You've got to have a concept that can fuel an endless number of episodes. So it's interesting to me to watch how these toy companies would try to figure that out too. So when they're adapting IP like this, they always start with the beginning. Like, here's the main characters, here's the stuff that appeared on screen.
Yeah.
Okay, now what do we do with it? And now we
Yeah.
go find something else. And half the time they would wander off into the weeds almost immediately, and like the second wave would go right into the toilet. But I think the Ghostbusters at least kept the spirit of the show because it was more about the TV series than the films, obviously. But it was pretty good, and they were well designed. They had nice play value. They put up with a beating. Like most of that stuff was pretty good as well. So although it didn't go longer than maybe 2 or 3 seasons, it was solid. It was a good series.
I enjoyed the toys, like I said, the first wave, but I don't remember playing a lot of Ghostbusters. I remember just like having the toys there. Ecto 1 was great. It felt like a toy. It felt like you could throw this thing off the stairs and the door might fall off, but it can go right back on. Do you know what I mean? It's not gonna like break. It was hollow, but solid. It was like the turtle van, it was that kind of Barbie-ish plastic.
Yeah,
Very durable.
it was good for one of the vehicles, one of the better vehicles for sure.
Palpatine is here. Hello, Lord.
He's back again.
That's not me. I'm surprised Darth Wizzy's not here. He can always tell when Jordan's on. Matt Rubin's here. Good morning, buddy. Good morning. Thundercats came in a good time. You just missed a Robotech talk, buddy, but that's okay. It's okay.
We'll get back to it.
7. So this is, for everyone who's just joining in late, the top 10 toy lines of the 80s. Jordan worked in Toys R Us throughout mid to late 80s and then opened up his own toy store. We're going to get to that, but right now we're taking Jordan through a trip down memory lane. And since he is the expert, we're going to see if he agrees with this list or not. M.A.S.K.
Did really well. Again, really, really good play value. The little rubber helmets were a neat kind of innovation. It didn't turn my crank, but I couldn't deny that kids were really digging it. And it did well for quite a run there. Got to be quite an expansive line, really. But it's
Very expensive.
yeah. I think I had a Condor. I just wanted one piece from it as just an example.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's funny you say that. That's how I collect toys now, where I want one of whatever figure from every line, just so I have a representation of every figure. So like Bionic 6, which is an obscure line from the 80s, right? I have one character. I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
Just want one of each. Yeah, I do that too. This line is one of my favorites. It's often a point of discussion on the channel here where Hasbro still keeps renewing the license. They keep the IP under their belt for whatever reason. They haven't done anything with it, save for making Matt Tracker, who's the main character. They made a G.I. Joe of him in 2008 for the 25th anniversary line, but they haven't done anything with M.A.S.K. And we always talk about, well, if they were to do M.A.S.K. today, how would they do that? Would they do a cartoon? Would they do a movie?
I believe that's the plan. if I'm not mistaken, Mask has been optioned and is in development hell right now. Like they're trying to figure out how to make a movie. And then if they do pull it off, then they'd relaunch the toy line to support it.
This is dangerous. This is dangerous because to me, I look at Mask like Transformers. They're colorful, they're blocky, they are of the time, they're 80s. Now, 2024, if you're going to make it take place in 2024, I mean, look on the road. Every car looks the same, every truck looks the same, and they're all gray. They're all gray, white, or black. So, when do you set this film? What would you do?
Well, most of the vehicles in the line really aren't real vehicles. Like obviously the Thunderhawk is a Camaro of that era, and the Condor is sort of a motorcycle of the time. But most of the designs were not specific vehicles. I can't remember the truck.
Rhino was the big rig.
Yeah. It wasn't a particular style of rig, if I remember correctly. It was just a rig. So you could do it. Like rigs are still out there, cars are still out there. Although if it would be an electric car, it'd be too heavy to fly anyway. But you could do it. It's the tone. The biggest problem they have with these things is the tone. Is this a comedy? Is this a straight up action movie? Like, where does it land tonally? And nobody can really get a handle on these things. Like the GI Joe movies that were struggling to figure out what they were, what the voice of the movie was going to be. So that's, I think, the biggest hurdle. Not so much the cars, because you could just start over with, like, there's Mustangs out there right now. Like, obviously, Camaros are retiring right now, but you could make a brand new Mustang, make it cool, make it fly, all that stuff. That's not the big issue. Is like, who's it targeting? What's the tone? Are we shooting for kids like we did originally, or are we shooting for the adults that used to be kids that love this toy line? All the usual kind of conversations. And it's hard to figure out.
Matt says a live action Mask movie. How are they going to do the what conversations? They would have to slow down. Knight Rider Super Pursuit from the 80s. The only way they could do it, in my estimation, Matt, is to have it in the 80s for it to make any kind of sense. It's like kind of ninjas today. They're ridiculous. But in the 80s, it all made sense, right? So for me, I would do Mask, kind of like what Transformers did a few years ago. I would make it Netflix animated, like whatever, computer graphics. I wouldn't do this live action. I just look at GI Joe. GI Joe was a disaster. But Jordan, I'll throw this out there too. How much of that is our fault? Because we look on the screen and that's not what Duke looks like. Why doesn't Duke have the brown shirt and the green pants? Well, because that was 1984. And then they don't want to see it because it doesn't look like Duke. So where do you go?
Yeah, why did the X-Men all wear black? That's not the way that we remember them either, at least for the first several movies.
Well, that's why X-Men 97 is now a thing, right?
This conversation can go on forever and it'll never get anywhere satisfying. Like everybody that's involved wants to guarantee its success, and everybody that's thrown money into the pot has something to say about what they think is going to be their best return on investment, the safest possible bet to try to get the most people out to see it and the most people to enjoy it. And half of those folks don't know what they're doing and don't appreciate the original IP, so their opinions don't matter, but they're in charge. That's a lot of what's going on.
Well, isn't it funny because they're all guys our age now, and the state of things has never been worse. I know we're going to talk about, you know what we're going to talk about at the end for a little bit. We got to talk about Star Wars. We always do when we get together, but
yeah, Impossible Pie's got it right at the heart of it. All of these other questions have got to be answered, but at the heart of it, it's just got to be a really good story. And that, oh boy, I don't want to go on again. We'll get to that later on, maybe as a little bit. But story has not been a priority for these big projects for some time.
Oh, so do you agree? Do you agree or disagree? If you were just to pick 10 toy lines, and I'm guessing this is more action figure based. So like, I don't know if like My Pet Monster and Rubik's Cube and stuff like that are going to show up on here. I'm guessing it's just action figures, but
yeah, this is the Saturday morning aisle. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Would you agree?
On there. M.A.S.K for sure. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Voltron. That's a crappy picture, so I'm not going to blow it up. Voltron. This was the Panache Place Voltron set. This was my Voltron. Again, I know there was the. Do you remember what the metal ones? Who made those?
Yeah, were they Bandai? I don't,
Possibly it might be Bandai. Anyone in the chat know who made the original metal Voltron toys that came to North America?
and I'm more familiar with the original line. I remember stacking the boxes for the metal ones, but I don't recall this one as much.
Yeah, this was the Panache place where they made the 3.75-inch action figures that had 5 points of articulation. Their helmets could come off, and they would go in the lion. So obviously, one of the big knocks on this line is that nothing is to
Oh,
scale.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Wait a minute. I do remember stocking the shelves with these now. Yep.
Yep. Remember
I remember
the coffin guys and
Yep. And the original boxes were all black for the metal ones, and the windows were punched out constantly because they were so heavy. But I remember these ones now too. And again, the quality of the design goes down, but maybe the
Matchbox.
functionality goes up a little bit. I can't remember, but this Voltron didn't impress me anywhere near as much as the original metal one. Especially if I remember correctly, there was a full box set of the original metals assembled,
Yes.
and so you could buy them individually or you could buy them all as one big set, and that was a pretty cool looking box.
Yeah. These ones I had both. Again, my mom spoiled me. I'm not going to apologize for it. But these ones I liked because there was a play set, the Castle of the Lions play set. There was all the different bad guys, including like Hagar the Witch. They made just like everybody. So you could really build the world outside of just the lions. Right. So I enjoyed the action figures almost more than assembling the Voltron, but I get why both people both toys appealed to multiple people. I get that. But
Yeah,
this was my jam here. But this is the one that gets made fun of a lot. I don't care. I don't care.
yeah, it was cool. I liked the metal ones. They were. I'm just trying to remember some of the other features of them, but I like the weight of them. You know, it was cool to feel like you were buying something of substance.
Oh yeah. Yeah, these are completely cheap. Like look at the I should have brought mine up here, but the lions, especially the two, the red and the green that go on the arms, like they're the lion's arms that go down. They're not articulated at all. It's just one solid piece, as you can. I don't know if you can see there, but they don't bend at all. Unlike the metal ones that had like 45 points of articulation on every lion, right?
Yeah, and that's what again why I love that cyclone thing because it looked right. It in every form and at every stage along the way, it looked the way that you wanted it to, and the way it did in the show was perfect. And these kind of toys had to compromise one way or the other. Normally, they didn't look right in one form or the other. But
Yeah,
people are saying that the metal ones were Matchbox. That was just like the North American distributor of it, but it wasn't built by Matchbox. They weren't designed by Matchbox. They came out of Japan.
right. That's the thing, though. It's not people our age in charge. It's 70-plus-year-olds like Kathleen Kennedy holding instead of. Okay, that's fair, Jim. That's fair.
Well,
Yeah.
that's part of the story. Yeah, like I respect the comment. That's not entirely wrong or anything like that. But when they do hand it over to younger people, we get the acolyte. So that's not a good idea either.
I've said it before, dude. Um, Too many writers nowadays are too influenced. There's too much of their idols being shown into their work. I've said that for a long time. Where you look at someone like Tarantino, it's not as noticeable, I don't think, but you definitely look at all everyone who's in charge of a Star Wars, save for the early Jon Favreau Mandalorian stuff. You could tell that's him, and you could see where Filoni stepped in. Right? Anyway, we're going down this path again.
We'll get back to it. We'll get back to it. Put a pin in that for now.
Hey, James, good morning. Great topic. Thank you. And thanks for being with us. I want to get to some comments here. Mo, good morning, dude. Good to see you. Matt, so Matt says, here's a question. Vehicle Force or Lion Force? I never understood the car one. I call it the car one. Never watched the cartoon. There's
Yeah,
like 99 of them that form Voltron. I never understood it. So Lion for me.
Lion for me. That was the original. The OG typically wins that argument every time.
Yeah, I think you're right. Jordan was saying that he thinks it's Bandai. Yeah, I would agree. Okay, so Voltron, should that be on the list? That's a bit of a, to me, a little bit more obscure. This is like on par with, I would say, Robotech. I know it was pretty big.
Yeah, but this is rebranded stuff from Japan too.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
um, Voltron might not be in my top 10. As important as that show was and as beloved as it was, it would go into another category with Robotech and Shogun Warriors and stuff like that in my mind. But I don't know that it would get into the top 10. As much as I like Voltron wasn't it for me. I loved Robotech. I was obsessed with that, but I probably still wouldn't put that line or all of the lines of Robotech in my top 10.
Fair.
Here we go. Okay, let's fight the urge to talk about anything but the toys. Let's go. So I came in as it was winding down. Like my time at TRU, it was winding down. It was the Power of the Force, the tail end of it. And that was interesting because I think back and seeing like markdowns on all these on a man-to-man, you know, markdown clearance.
Oh, don't say that. Oh my God.
Yeah, it just wasn't hot anymore. With nothing to look forward to, it died pretty quick. The diehard fans gobbled up everything they wanted, and then it cooled off pretty fast as of the last couple of seasons. So 85, 86 was really, I think, the end of it.
And crazy too that Kenner wanted to keep going with it, and although there was no movies from George coming out, they still made vehicles. You could see the prototypes online, but
Yeah.
they were canceled. Like they made their own creations, which were they're pretty. I'll say they're pretty good. I think they're pretty good. They wanted to keep going, but ultimately the plug got pulled, and a lot of that Power of the Force stuff. Nobody wanted Star Wars anymore, which is crazy. By 85, and then you had weird stuff like Yak Face. Nobody wanted that. Nobody wanted a man-to-man. Nobody wanted all those weird creatures.
No.
Anakin was impossible to get.
Jim Smith is saying that last run was Power of the Jedi. Is that right? I thought it was Power of the Force. That's what the card I remember.
I remember Power of the Force because in 95 it was called Power of the Force 2.
Yeah.
Which was supposed to be a direct, well, I don't know, not a continuation, but like picking up title-wise where it left off. You might be right, Jim. I don't know.
That's not how I remember it, but it might have been different in different regions too. But I remember it was more of the packaging that was, it was more similar to the packaging from Europe in its final run.
And guys, stay with us because we're going to get into the 90s because Jordan also owned his own toy store. He didn't work for anybody else. He had his own toy store in the 90s, which was one of my favorite time periods to talk about Star Wars because it was so weird. And yet I wish we could go back to it, but we're going to get there. So Star Wars is out in 85. No one wants anything to do with it, but so you said you dealt with the tail end of it.
Yeah.
And you blew out a lot of the last wave kind of thing. So you didn't really see the super hype from it at a store level.
Well, as a kid, when I was buying it.
Well, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. But not working at a retail outlet, not when it was at its hottest. No, I mean, that would have been the early 80s. But, and I didn't have too much of the early ones.
Yeah. And it's funny, this particular line, this, and I've often said that the golden age of Star Wars collecting, and most people do not agree with me, but I will stick to it, is 2000 to 2010. Because you think these characters are bizarre. We got stuff that we will never see again. So we got all the obscure aliens and stuff like that, but we got them for Phantom Menace, Revenge of the Sith, all these weird vehicles, all the Wookiee homeworld stuff. We got all that stuff. So if you wanted literally anything, you could get it in the 2000s. One reason, Jordan, I loved Star Wars so much was because they made characters that weren't just Luke, Han, and Leia. It was, the weird walrus guy that walks across the screen for 2 seconds. It's like we got a toy of him.
Yeah. My weird obsession with the more obscure characters, because I was a huge fan of Bib Fortuna until they ruined him on TV.
Hey, we're not supposed to bring that up.
But I loved these mysterious characters that I didn't really know the full story to. So I wanted to kind of fill in the blanks for myself. So I would buy those figures and kind of tell those stories. That's kind of the thing that turned me onto this whole thing. And it was the perfect combination. Like, it's criticized for being oversimplified. Like the figures were really, really simple. You look at Luke up there underneath the number 5 there in the upper left-hand corner. that original figure is lame, man. And Darth Vader with that goofy vinyl cape doesn't look the way he did on screen, but we loved them anyway, and that kept them cheap, relatively cheap, so they were accessible. So
Yeah.
it's just a really perfect combination of price point, play value, accuracy, like all that stuff. They hit the sweet spot with it, and that's why it became the standard for so long.
I wish we would get back to this time. Now, toys, I think with these IPs are made for us. Let's not, there's no mistaking that. It's not made for kids of a new generation. The Star Wars toys they make now are for us because the price point, they look realistic. I wish we could get back to stuff like this where you said, you look at Darth Vader, he's kind of goofy looking. He's got like a Count Dracula cape. But
Yeah,
you knew that it was Darth Vader, and you had the imagination to make that toy come alive. It was your puppet. That was your Darth Vader. Luke didn't look like Mark Hamill at all. So what? But so what? It was Luke. You know what I mean?
yeah.
I don't like this where we've headed with toys where they're mini statues now. Like,
It's photorealistic because the kids aren't playing with them anymore. So play value has fallen by the wayside now. That's not as important a part of the formula that they're pursuing anymore because most of this market is now to adults. Kids
yeah,
don't play with toys the way we did. They play with video games now.
yeah. I was gonna ask you. I was gonna save that for later, but you brought it up now, so let's bring it out. I know. Well, neither of us have kids, but from what I saw in my time at EB, and half the time there was spent selling toys. The kids didn't want anything to do with any of the toys, at least of the stuff of our generation. They keep bringing out Transformers, they keep bringing out He-Man, they keep bringing out Star Wars. They don't care. They wanted Fortnite
Yep.
because that's their thing. They wanted Fortnite toys, Roblox toys. They wanted that stuff.
Yeah. I'll fight the urge to let my old mandanitis really come out.
I
but
let her out, buddy. It's Sunday. Let her out.
um, things are going to get weirder now because the youngest age group out there today are turning their backs on motion pictures and television. So when they no longer watch movies or go to the theaters to watch movies and no longer care about series television, then all of this is going to change dramatically yet again. And it's happening right now. Like it's gotten to be pretty extreme and it's going to get worse. They're just consuming really short form videos on TikTok and that kind of stuff. So they're not interested in uh, an entire story. You don't need that anymore. So what do you
Well,
do? How do you
listen,
capture them now?
can you blame them? What are they getting? Okay, and I gotta say this, okay, because I don't want to get roasted in the chat.
Well, this is above and beyond even any arguments about quality of storytelling, like
No,
or concept. This is just about the format that they now are most focused on consuming. Like it's the Quibi thing. Quibi was just a little too soon. That if the Quibi were launched right now, it might be the biggest thing in the world. But short form is what they're accustomed to. They've got what they want in the palm of their hand, and they can be entertained constantly. They don't have to wait 30 minutes to finish a show or an hour to finish a show. It's 30 seconds. And now I'm on to my next show. 30 seconds, 30 seconds, 30 seconds, 30 seconds, 30 seconds.
okay, I agree with you to a certain extent, but I would also say, what do they have to choose from? Even look at something as universally loved as Spider-Man. Okay. The Avengers and all that stuff, the stories we are getting the Infinity Gauntlet story from 1991. They're not getting their own story. They're being fed stories from when dad was a kid. And if there's anything that's super more lame than, watching stuff when dad was a kid, I don't know what it is. They don't want anything to do with dad stuff.
Well, a
Right.
lot of them don't have any sense of that, though, because the movies are their first point of entry into that world. Like they're not reading comics anymore. I can tell you that. And
Oh yeah, that's true. But I
they're
mean,
not
like,
buying toys. So going to see those massive blockbuster movies was in many cases, their first exposure to these characters. And for a while there, Marvel was working. Let's face it, they were at the top of their game. But now we can talk about quality of storytelling and all kinds of other kind of agendas at work and how that's crumbling things. But again, the kids, aren't interested in the delivery systems that we depended on to have fun with.
Okay. So you're saying, let's talk about Frozen Seat or whatever. Let's talk about Frozen Throne, Frozen Empire that came out. Oh my god.
Okay.
And again, I get it. Like I was saying, this is just my opinion, guys. Okay. On my channel, everyone's safe here. You can say whatever you want. This is just my opinion. Do you think that kids really care about old Bill Murray? And furthermore, they want to go back and watch the first one that was from the dinosaur era of the 80s? They don't care about that stuff.
No,
They
no.
don't care about it. So they try to put kids in it, but it's like, so what, man? Like, I don't,
They put
that's
the
like,
kids in it because they think they need to hit that demographic. But as we're saying, that demographic is getting less and less interested in whatever it is in the form of a movie or a TV show. And then they feel obligated also to do justice to the original characters so that fans of that will come out. And they're just trying to hit a dozen bullseyes at once. And some of these bullseyes that they're shooting for have no value to many of us, but they still feel obligated to try to hit them. And that's when you come up with mud. It's not one thing. It's trying to be 100 things at once. That original Ghostbusters movie was a creative expression, a pure creative expression by just a handful of people. And it's awesome because it was a singular point of view and they just had one goal. Let's have some fun. Here's the concept. Let's run. And now, ever since then, they've been chasing that and then adding these other kind of goals and agendas to it. And now they're just cranking out really expensive mud. And
yeah.
it doesn't work. It's not the same process, so you're not going to get the same result.
And that first movie, like we said backstage, was not about proton packs or the cool trap or the car. It was about those four guys, and those tools were just tools they used to catch ghosts. Now they've become like these. It's more important to see the artifact than it is to see a story. People lose their minds when they showed the crunchy wrapper in Afterlife. It's like that was one of probably 10 ad lib takes that Bill Murray did with Dan Aykroyd, and that one's, let's keep that one. That was great, Bill. It
Yeah.
was just a throwaway joke, and now no, the crunchy wrappers. Now we got to put it in the Smithsonian and put it under glass. It's like it's not about these artifacts; it's about the characters. And when you don't have those characters anymore, and the old characters come in and they don't give a flying F, you could tell by just looking at them. We weren't supposed to talk about this stuff.
Yeah, we could go on and on and on. And these are conversations that are happening everywhere. The storytelling well, here's another facet that we talk about a lot in my circles is that everybody says that they want to see original material, but that's not true. The fact of the matter is that, I mean, and this is for real, this is not just my opinion. Nobody
Sure.
wants completely original material. The magic, the sweet spot is giving people something that seems a little familiar, but is also really fresh. Like a 50-50, you're giving them something new and old at the same time. If you can do that, then you're going to please a lot more people than not. If it's completely original, then people will get confused by it. They don't know what it is. So it has to have the shape and kind of the rhythm of something that they know and like already. So going back to this stuff was originally their way of kind of guaranteeing the best return on their investment, right? Because we know
Right.
people love these things, so let's go back and do another one of those. But sequelitis has gotten really bad now, and it's not. There's no way to kind of recapture the energy or the point of view of the original because the original creators are gone, and now there's too many cooks in the kitchen, right? If we're going to spend $200 million, then 100 people get to have their say in as to what it is. That was never
Yeah.
the case with Ghostbusters. They just had fun making a movie that they were basically trying to entertain themselves with and hoping other people would love it. It's so hard to get anything made anymore. It's all like corporate agendas and like art by committee. That's nonsense. And I'm hoping that this system collapses. And some people already say it already has, and they just haven't admitted it. And that $5 to $20 million movies can start being made. And if we can just start cranking out a lot of more original stuff, not completely original, but more original-ish type things at the $5 to $20 million range, then you're going to start to see some really, really cool new things that could be as exciting as Ghostbusters was way back in the day. That's what it's going to take. But you can't do that at $200 million, $100 million. Too many people have too much to say about it.
I will say one thing, and then we'll move on about the 2016 one. At least with that, at least they tried to kind of do the same thing. I would almost, at this point, I don't know if this is contradicting myself, but I would almost rather see that, because at least it made sense with four adults that somehow they kind of knew what the equipment did. It's far more believable than, like, okay, the one child is the granddaughter of Egon. Okay, she's super genius. That's fine. The other kids, why are they there? Like, I saw the scene where they're chasing the salamander ghost throughout the city in a car, like shooting it with, like, this. It's just it's ridiculous to me. It's not what those movies about. Maybe I'm the dinosaur and that's what they are about, and I'm just more about watching the four of those comedians go at each other, and it was just so great. I wanted to see that. I didn't care about Gozer and the State Puff Marshmallow. I cared about how funny those guys were and how
Yeah.
you cared about them, you
Yeah,
know?
I'd much rather see, like we said backstage. There's some really good comedic character actors in this new one, but they're not given enough to do, and there's way too many characters and subplots in this thing. That goes a long way to creating kind of a muddy effect too. But there's Paul Rudd. Everybody loves Paul Rudd, and he's super funny. We know that. We've seen him do all kinds of stuff like Anchorman. The guy can roll with like improv great. You've got Patton Oswalt in this one, and you've got Kumail Nanjiani. And then take those three guys and throw McKenna Grace in there
Yeah.
and her, young Egon. Although I do have problems with her character because she can do anything. That's too much. She literally is capable of doing anything. So she's got no flaws. That's another issue with a lot of characters today. But those four would make for an interesting movie. Nice, tight pack of four people, all comedians, all having fun, all reinterpreting what the heart and soul of Ghostbusters is. Not this gigantic corporate machine with 100 characters on the screen at any given time. That's crazy. It's never going to feel right if they keep pursuing that kind of a formula.
Sorry guys, we went off a little bit there, but I think it's makes sense to talk about that stuff now, because the toy industry right now, as you guys know, is in the same boat where we're just getting spoon-fed the same stuff over and over again. This time at a different scale. So Jordan, I was going to say, if they brought back Mask, I bet you, as my mom used to say, dollars to donuts, that the Mask toys would be 6-inch and there would be no vehicles. Much like they have done with GI Joe, that it's like, what?
Yeah, because vehicles are so expensive to make now.
But they Hasbro has this notion that no one wants 3.75 anymore because we're not kids. But then when you do something like Star Wars Black Series, you don't have an X-wing, you don't have the Falcon, which are just as important
Yeah.
as the aliens and the bad guys. And
Again, they're trying to hit too many targets at the same time. With one shot, they're trying to hit a dozen targets, and you're never going to do that. It loses its soul. It loses the original kind of goals that it had.
yeah,
It just gets way too complicated. So, again, are the new toys a higher quality item? Yeah, but in what sense? It was never about that for us because, again, like people have been saying in the chat, we loved our Luke Skywalker figure, even though it didn't look anything like Mark Hamill.
yeah. There was a
We loved it.
comment that said, "I want a Luke Skywalker figure. I don't want a Mark Hamill figure."
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I would agree
So
totally.
it was simpler. There were simpler demands put on things at that point in history. And yes, we're adults now and we see things differently. But I don't care for that argument either because um, we've grown up and maybe we've gotten more sophisticated. But what we haven't lost is our ability to kind of latch on to what we were attracted to originally. And that's got more to do with that soul and the voice of the piece that I'm kind of talking about
Right.
than anything to do with technology and the accuracy and the kind of prowess that they build new toys with. It's got nothing to do with that. It was just like the spirit of it is what resonates with us. That's why we love it, and we keep trying to love it despite what they make and despite the fact that they're making it harder on us.
Well, that nostalgia feeling is powerful, dude.
Yeah.
We all love that little feeling. We all love to well up a little bit. It's like, oh my god, and you see, again, since we're talking about it, you see Bill Murray again in that jumpsuit, and you're just like, you think about the 80's, you think about where you were when you saw Ghostbusters, you think about You were a little bit older when you saw Ghostbusters 2. Maybe you think about the toys, and it all comes back to you. And all that matters is that you're seeing Bill Murray on the screen. It doesn't matter that should I see Bill Murray, because in that moment you're so consumed by the nostalgia. Me too. Force Awakens, me too. When I saw Han Solo crying like a baby, okay? Instead of asking myself, should I see Han Solo? Does it make sense to see Han Solo?
It's going to get worse, man, with the advent of AI within the next 10 years, easily within the next 5, probably. They'll be able to make a new Ghostbusters movie of the original cast. Like, think about that. It's set in that period in time.
Rob was showing. We were shooting here a couple weeks ago, and Rob was showing me some videos. He's like, "Dude, look at this." He's like, "This scares me," and he showed me like a 2-minute video of like a cougar running in the snow,
Yep.
completely AI generated, not one camera. He's like, "This is the future," and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, like it's
Yeah.
crazy, man." Like a full like 2-minute video, like with the hair moving, and it didn't look like a computer.
No,
It
it
didn't
looks
look like CGI. It didn't look like a cartoon. It looked like it was real, man.
Yep, there's footage out there of CG rendered humans that look 100% real. Some of it's wonky. They're still having trouble with fingers and stuff like that, but it's coming fast. And
Yeah.
you're going to be able to say, hey, you know what? I missed that show, Bosom Buddies. It would be great to have a new season of Bosom Buddies. Click.
Dude, that's effing wild to think about.
Yeah. It sounds like magic. It sounds preposterous, and people will go, yeah, whatever. No, it's coming. It will happen, and we have no idea what kind of an effect it's going to have on the entire industry yet. No idea. But it's going to wipe out production. So everybody that holds a camera or a mic or a light or any of that stuff, set designers, costume designers, it's going to wipe out all of that, or at least allow people to circumvent that. But the one thing that they can't replace is great storytelling. So the fundamentals are never going to go away. And right now, like people have been saying in the chat, being able to craft a really effective story is taking a back seat to all these other questions and answers. And it's going to be more important than ever when everybody in the world can literally make their own feature. Then the only stuff that's going to rise to the top is the stuff made with really excellent fundamental storytelling skills. And there's going to be a sea of garbage, unlike we have ever seen before. Like, wait for it. It's coming.
One reason I'm drawn to YouTube, even before I had my own channel, was I liked watching stuff that had heart behind it. It was just someone in their camera. The editing wasn't perfect. There's no flashy. No offense to Mr. Beast, he's earned what he has, okay? But I just mean no flashy Mr. Beast, like super polished production. It was just a dude in his camera showing some footage or whatever. That's the kind of stuff I gravitate towards now. It's not these big productions. So the more bloated Ghostbusters gets, and if you look at the first film too, it's not bloated. The end, it's pretty spectacular, but the film's not bloated.
Nope.
Anyway.
Nope. Nope. So what you're talking about is emotional resonance. In my business, we say the number one job of the screenwriter is to elicit an emotional response from the audience. And we have to go further now because it can't just be any emotional response. If you write a horror movie and people laugh at it, that's not success. So the number one job for a screenwriter is to elicit the intended emotional response from your audience, make them feel something.
Right.
The bigger and messier these productions get, the harder it is to actually make people feel anything about them. They just become numb.
Right. Yeah, it's rough. I blame Disney. I blame Force Awakens, even though I still like that movie. That Han Solo thing. That was the beginning, the first time I remember any of that stuff. Anyway, I'm sorry, we're gonna get back on topic. TJC, good afternoon. Jim says big Hollywood money will bury that, like big old buried the 60 engine in the 60s. I don't know what that means.
I don't think so. Big Hollywood likes this idea because they don't have to hire people. They can just come up with their own ideas and have a couple of people who are really good at prompting. They can use AI to try to write a story as well, and it's terrible at that. And it will be terrible at that for a while, for the foreseeable future. So now Hollywood's already mesmerized by it, and the big executives are trying to figure out how to make that their most profitable kind of move yet. they can get rid of studios. Imagine that. You just need an office. You don't need that gigantic studio space that you have right now. Imagine how much money is being put into those spaces and all of the employees
Yep.
in them. This might make that redundant. Well, the guy that Tyler Perry just had that. He was about to throw almost $1 billion at a brand new studio, and then when that 2-minute example of AI generated photorealistic footage came out, he lost his mind and he scrapped the entire deal because he's like, I'm not
Wow.
building a studio if studios are about to become extinct. Like that was one of
Wow.
the biggest deals in Hollywood, and it got walked out back and shot because they don't know what's going to happen next.
Wow. That's yeah, that's crazy. I'm just trying to let it all sink in, and everyone in the chat, you guys are saying some really great comments here. AI is scary. Everyone's saying it's going to be like Skynet. Well, obviously, it's not going to end well if humans are going to be replaced. And I'm not a conspiracy guy, but I don't think it's good. I don't think it's good. Let's go back to practical effects for movies. Screw AI or computer generated characters. That's never going to happen. Cutthroat as much as we want. You can put in practical Yoda in episode 8. Sure. You can put dabbles of it here or there, but it's way too expensive. And computer graphics are just easier, unfortunately.
Yeah, the standard right now is practical with like CG enhancements, right? Just to kind of level up a little bit, hide the wires, so to speak. That's the best stuff right now. It looks like you're shooting
Sure.
practically, you're shooting in camera, and then you're fixing and enhancing with a little bit of post. But friends and neighbors, that is going to go away, or will at least be relegated to like an old timey kind of bespoke minority that wants to keep that kind of filmmaking alive. But it won't be the norm anymore.
Physical items that we can touch are like disappearing. We talk about this all the time with video games, how movies and video games are for real this year. They're gone out of Walmart, they're gone out of Best Buy. You can't touch you can't, like, we're humans. You can't
Yep.
touch anything anymore. It's like you can't touch your movies, you can't touch your video games. Why have practical effects? Yoda doesn't really exist. He just lives in an AI mind. All right. Okay, we gotta make this a little bit better. All right, let's everyone cheer up. Star Wars. So Star Wars. Does Star Wars deserve to be on this list? Back to the topic.
100% transformed the entire toy industry in a massive way. Initially, in a really cool and exciting way. Now, of course, it's been pushed into something that's not as good for the consumer. But yeah, licensing and merchandising was born right there. So we got to enjoy it in the heyday before everybody got super greedy about it. But I don't know. It definitely has to be number one, though.
Lucas begun this insane toy licensing idea, and he brought it back in the 90s. Like, I did a show on the 95 Power of the Force, and we'll get into that with your toy store. But I did a show on that last week, and how it blew me away that not only it was Star Wars, but we had a film that came out in the 70s that in 1995 was getting toys again when there was nothing new, because we didn't know about the special editions at the time, and we sure as hell didn't know about the prequels coming. So it was like, wow. Like, what other film franchise has toys that are still in the aisle? Do you know what I mean? It's absolutely insane. All right, let's move on. I never heard of this one. Masters of the Universe.
Yeah, tiny little boutique line. Yeah. Yeah, this was a monster, and it remained a monster for my entire stay at Toys R Us. Yeah.
The crown jewel of the collection, I would say, would be the Eternia playset, the rarest, the most expensive, the biggest.
Yep.
It just showed this and the USS Flag, showing how much Mattel and Hasbro got behind their IPs, and they threw millions at designing the flag itself and Eternia. Eternia didn't do as well as the flag did, but both today are grails in any toy forum. If you have any of those, you're lucky and in good shape. But they're just massive, and that just showed how massive the toy industry was in the mid 80s. Jordan worked at Toys R Us in the mid 80s to the early 90s. So Jordan, why don't you tell us a little bit about the He-Man aisles?
Well, they got the biggest footprint of any line. Like again, Star Wars was fading, and Star Wars didn't have the depth of the line at the point that I was working there anymore. Masters of the Universe was kind of established a new sweet spot, a new combination of attributes that hadn't been seen before. Like it looked good in the aisle. Even the Star Wars stuff didn't look good as good on the shelf as the Masters of the Universe stuff because of its scale, the additional scale.
Right.
The cards and everything looked good. The figures were nice and big and meaty and chunky. Yeah, it was a monster for a long time. I remember the battle armor round that came through. I remember some of those special boxed figures like Modulok. I remember really being enamored with Grizzlor because of the fur. That was a new kind of thing.
Cool. So cool.
Yeah. And yeah, it was just a really well designed line. Lots of depth and complexity to it. And talk about robust. I don't know of another toy line you can beat up as hard as He-Man and have it
Oh yeah.
survive. Yeah, it was well thought out. So they really hit it out of the park with that one.
Yeah, I mean barbarians and ninjas, right? That's what the 80's were about, at least the early 80's. It was all about barbarians and ninjas, and with the popularity of the Conan movie and 1,000 B movies that came out with barbarians and wizards, like remember Krull, like stuff like that. Like
Of course I do.
all that stuff was all the rage, right? Revenge of the Ninja with Shokazugi, all that stuff was just the stuff I just consumed. Even like really bad B movies that I knew were bad at the time that I still loved, like Beastmaster with like Mark Singer. Like I love that stuff, right?
Oh,
So
you
this
call
was
that you call that bad B movie stuff? I was thinking of like Barbarian Brothers and
oh yeah.
Sword and the Sorcerer. Like the first Beastmaster was actually pretty solid. But yeah,
Right.
all of that stuff.
It was, but and I don't want to say like I didn't have an eye for B movies back then. I just mean now if you watch Beastmaster, it's pretty rough, right?
Oh,
Back
it's
then it was
cheese.
like the
It's
best thing
cheese.
ever. But now if you watch Conan, it's still as great as it was. That's what I mean, right?
Yeah, it's again, we talk about this in the storytelling and the screenwriting too. Like the purity and specificity of ideas are really important. The more clarity that your concepts have and how you communicate them is really, really important. So, Masters of the Universe boiled everything down into its purest and like even silliest, right? The names they chose and everything kind of explained what they could do. It was a really cool shorthand that kids could pick up really quickly, understand quickly. Yeah, it was smart in a very simple way.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, technology mixed with magic. We forgot to talk about D&D. Of course, D&D was popular too back then. Like
It was not a heavyweight line though.
no, I mean like the D&D game, the actual game
Oh
was a
yeah, yeah.
big influence on and all this kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah.
And people forget that the Filmation Black Star came before, and the toy line of Black Star came after. So there was Black Star. There was a few competitors. Black Star did nothing. Sectars. You were there for Sectars because that
Yep,
would have been 86.
yep, for sure.
Way too much real estate for those figures, especially the ones with the wings. You remember how much
Yeah.
shelf space that took up, man? The
Yep.
windows too. I can imagine how many of those were poked in.
Oh yeah, all the time. Yeah. Yeah, that was a good line, but it didn't last. It basically had 1 year to make a splash, and then it died pretty quick. But they were well designed, and the flying bits, like yeah, you wore them like puppets. Yeah, that was again a cool innovation. Everybody was excited about it, but the kids didn't actually go for it the way they hoped to. But I hope they would, obviously. Hey, Matt Rubin, yes, Sword and Sorcerer. The Sword and Sorcerer was the name of the title. Isn't that the one with the three blades? Yes. And you want to talk about practical effects? They ran electricity through that thing to make it spark and stuff like that, so it almost killed somebody on set making it work. Great stories behind that cheesy movie.
Hey, out of all those movies that we're talking about, all those cheesy B barbarian sci-fi movies, what's your favorite out of all of them? If you had to pick one.
The cheesiest.
Like I would say Revenge of the Ninja would be mine. Out of movies like that.
I tended to lean more towards sci-fi and post-apocalyptic stuff because of my love for Mad Max. So I liked movies like Battle Truck, which are not good movies.
Battle Truck? I never heard of that
Yeah,
one.
man. Yeah, also sometimes known as Warlords of the 21st Century, but I knew it under the title Battle Truck, and it was this monstrous semi that had. Anyway, go look for it. It's hilarious. But I loved that subgenre. That was my particular favorite. But I watched all the sword and sorcery ones too. Like I was there and I paid to see the sword and the sorcerer in theaters. Treasure of the Four Crowns, like with the revival of 3D, Space Hunter, all that stuff.
Space Hunter and the Forbidden Zone, the Adventures of the Forbidden Zone with Molly Ringwald, right? That
Ollie's
one.
first, yeah, and Michael Ironside as the
Yeah.
ogre dog. Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
he's so creepy in that. Oh,
yeah. I
um,
loved all
and
that stuff.
Michael Ironside and Rip Torn, they were like two of the dirtiest, creepiest guys, like actors. Their characters, right? They always played the same kind of.
Yep.
I think Mapex, I think Mapex or whatever. I think that was the name of his character in Beastmaster, Rip Torn's.
There's Ice
Memoir.
Pirates is another one. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Got any water? I remember that.
Oh, there you go. Battle Trucks on Tubi. There you
Nice. It's not worth watching. I warn you, but I like it.
go. So the one other one I'll throw in there is Brave Star, which was also a Mattel IP,
Yep.
but that one suffered because the cartoon didn't come out until a year after, so they launched the toys first.
Yeah, the timing was bad.
And if you didn't have the toy or the comic book to go along with it, good luck in a sea of this. Okay, Masters obviously belongs up there. I think it should be higher.
Well, I don't know what's coming next, but I would say so.
You haven't figured out the top three?
No, not by
No?
this list.
Okay. Let's move on.
Joe. Yeah, okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. No question. One of the most prolific. You want to talk about a story engine that can keep going, right? So this is a concept that they could keep cranking out figures for and never kind of burn out the idea. I mean, they got pretty silly at times, but they still kept going. So it's definitely one of the biggest, most important lines out there. And they redefined 3 3/4 with all that extra articulation.
Yeah, this is still, in my opinion, the greatest toy line of all time. It's my favorite to collect. I love it. Just how ridiculous they went with every base, every play set. Hasbro was really good when the Hasselfeld brothers were in control. They were really good at making sure that every family could play with it. So, the rich families could afford the GI Joe headquarters, but if you didn't have a lot of money, you could still get the little bivouac outpost playset, right? They made sure that there was different price points that would suit every family, and I think that's something that's sorely missed now today. I mean, granted, they're just making toys for adults anyway, but do you know what I mean? Like the fact that you could get something for everybody was really special.
Yeah. And this was, again, a different period in human history where the idea was that you'd get together with people, you'd play together in the same room. That's
Yeah.
not that's not a thing anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. GI Joe. I mean, we don't have a lot to say about GI Joe. We talk about it every week on the channel here, so we're gonna move on. Obviously, Joe deserves to be up there. It would be number one for me, but
I
see
like
what
I liked, again, I would pull the nichest characters. I was like, oh, wait a minute. This is a sailor with a parrot on his shoulder. I'm getting that one. Like I'd pull the weirdest ones. I don't even remember the name of that figure. But
Shipwreck.
Shipwreck, yes, of course.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's the stuff that I really like, and most of the chat don't like those characters, like not like Shipwreck, but like the super fantastic ones like Crocmaster.
Oh, I had Crocmaster. 100% I had Crocmaster.
Crocmaster, Big Boa, who was the trainer with the robotic head. Remember like Crystal Ball, who was like the Vincent Price character with the.
Oh God, yeah.
Remember
Hey,
that?
who was the spy? Zontar? What was his name?
Zartan.
Zartan. Yeah, yeah. So I
Yeah.
had him in his kind of water skidoo, whatever that thing was. Yeah, he was cool. Yeah, just chose bits and pieces of that line, and it went on forever, and it never cooled off in the time that I was there at Toys R Us. So it is definitely a big winner. Yeah.
Hasbro was also really good at adapting to trends. So like in the 90's, we got the Dinosaur Hunter, coincidentally around the time Jurassic Park started to come into theaters, right? So they
And
were
the
they were also really good at that.
what was the eco themed line?
Yeah, Eco Warriors, yeah.
Yeah, that was maybe their worst that I can recall, but they took a swing at it anyway.
Star Brigade was G.I. Joe in space, and then
Yeah,
there was
right.
my favorite, which was the DEF, the Drug Enforcement, because the war on drugs in the 90's. So
Right.
you had Headman, so it wasn't Cobra Commander. You had Headman. He was a dirty, his teeth were all rotten from drugs. He had a long hair, so he was a thug, and the fedora and all that kind of stuff. Great stuff. All
Yeah.
right, we're moving on from Joe. Transformers.
Yes and no. Transformers is awesome, but as soon as they started designing their own in North America, they went off a cliff. These are all kind of rebranded. Like, what's the one? Yeah, what is that pale turquoisey green one beside Devastator?
That's Cup.
Yeah. So as of Hot Rod and Cup and those types of characters, I checked out. And those looked like garbage to me, and I wanted nothing to do with them. But everything prior to that, the first gen,
Right here. That hurts. That hurts. Right here.
they weren't anything. They were nothing at all. They were just kind of random, blobbish kind of characters. So I didn't appreciate it at all. I liked the accuracy of the vehicles. I wanted them to look like something in particular. I didn't even mind the weird kind of anomalies in scale, like, like Soundwave. Wait a minute, he's a cassette deck, but he's as big as a car. I don't. Anyway, that kind of
Well, they
thing didn't even
wanted you because they were made for kids, right? They wanted you to feel like you had a tape deck. Like Blaster, remember they tried to make it as big as they could so you could put it on your shoulder like a boombox, right? But
Yeah, but that was an American construct. I don't think Blaster was what part of the original Japanese line like Soundwave was, if I'm not mistaken. It
it was
was one of
Microchange and Diaclone were the two Japanese toy lines that Hasbro bought from.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. Takara was the big
yeah,
manufacturer, weren't
yeah.
they? Yeah.
Hey, Matt Noon, good to see you, buddy. And Brendan, what's up? Masters Universe, you got it just in time.
Motu for the win.
Um,
Great line. I had Omega Supreme. I had all the big ones. And I loved some of the knockoffs because Toys R Us constantly had like a 4-foot section of or so of like cheap Japanese knockoffs. So I bought all of the cassettes from the knockoff line. So there was like 20 of them that you could get. I bought all of the assemblers. I had everything up to Predaking and every combination there was. So that was like an entire, I don't know, 8 feet of shelf space of just the giant combiners.
Oh, they were so good. Like the aerial bots, the Stunticons,
Yeah.
Combaticons.
I had all those.
So good.
Yeah, an original Prime. But again, as soon as the second wave characters came out, then I lost all interest in it entirely.
I'm not going to change your mind, but I will stick up for Cup and Hot Rod because they're. I don't know if they were supposed to be because it was the movie was in the year 2005. So I don't know if they were supposed to be Earth cars of 2005 or they were Cybertronian versions.
Well, that was the idea. Yeah, they weren't Earth vehicles, but that's why I didn't care. I could care less.
You didn't care about that. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. The movie, like I loved the cartoon. The movie, that wave of '86, that's where I was like, this is the best thing of all time. Like I loved all of those characters. I get why you didn't. It was after that that they lost me when they started doing the Target Masters and the Headmasters and even some of the triple changers. And then they had the double spy guys, just like,
Yeah, I had a couple triple changers just out of curiosity, but they didn't look right in any form.
yeah, they were just blobs. And also because the North American cartoon stopped, right? It still went on in Japan, but here it stopped and we were getting all these toys. And I remember just being like, well, I don't know who Sandstorm is. I don't know who this guy is. He's not in anything, right? So you really needed the cartoon to fuel that.
Yeah, yeah. I like if you can look at the chat, somebody Smoke just asked, "Who's Jordan Morris? Like, what's this geezer on about?"
Who's Jordan Morris? Jordan Morris is my buddy, first and foremost. He's a screenwriter. He's a producer. He's everything. So for this particular broadcast, we brought Jordan on because he used to work in Toys R Us in Canada in the mid 80s for a great number of years. And then he moved on to open his own toy store. So we're going to get into that just after this list.
And the important detail being that at that point in history, that particular Toys R Us was the busiest store in the world.
That's crazy. The one in London.
Yeah. We were located, for everybody that's not familiar with the geography, we were located halfway between Toronto and Detroit in southwestern Ontario. And there used to be bus tours that would come up and stop at our store that were on their way to Toronto from Detroit. So there were constant bus tours going back and forth between Toronto and Detroit, and they would stop at our store just because they were novel. Like, nobody in Canada had seen a Toys R Us before. And for the first few years, it was berserk.
Yeah. That's I did not know that, dude, until today. I didn't know it was the busiest in the world.
Yeah.
North America, I thought I remember you saying that. I don't remember the world. That's insane.
Yep.
That's wonderful. Okay, so what's number one?
It's gonna be
Obviously, we can't argue Transformers deserves to be on this list. What
it's
would
gonna be
number one
turtles.
be?
It's gonna be turtles.
Could be Turtles. What do you guys say in the chat? What's number one here? What haven't we seen? Well, we haven't seen Superpowers. We haven't seen Secret Wars.
Nah, Secret Wars, nah.
And then you're getting into Lesser Lines, Centurions, that kind of thing, Mentec. But no, yeah, you called it. Number one.
Yeah, so they took the aesthetics of they really kind of played with the same kind of aesthetics that Motu had, like big, chunky, durable, and then it was a more limited world, but they ran with it for a long time, and they could reinvent that, and they successfully did it for years and years and years. So that was a really important line too. Yeah, yeah.
They keep reinventing Turtles, rebooting it, and every single time they do, it takes off every time. There's nothing like it. Like it's every version of Turtles. This is the one we grew up with, right? The original, well, the comic, the Eastman Laird comic book, and then the first cartoon is the one I grew up with. But every version has done amazing and has its own generation. Most IPs can't say that.
Yeah.
Smoke is asking this. What does Jordan produce?
Well, I produced a little movie called Nintendo Quest, and then more recently one called Mr. Joseph Magic of Make Believe. Yeah,
Which is
that's
just
the one that won at the Toronto International Film Festival and has just been nominated for a bunch of Canadian Screen Awards, which are a combination of our Academy Awards and Emmy Awards.
so yeah, nothing major.
A few,
a few things.
Not a lot of super high profile, massive projects, though. I'll be the first to admit.
Well, two movies with a lot of heart, so I will say that. I might be a little biased because I know you guys, but
that's got as much to do with our buddy Rob as anything.
Of
Rob
course,
knows how to find the heart and soul of a story.
So this line, I would have been in. It came out in '87. I would have been in grade 7. So I'm getting to that point where I'm starting to feel a little weird about buying this stuff or having this stuff. It doesn't mean I didn't do it. I still did it. I still had the first wave of Turtles. Really enjoyed it. Didn't know anything about the comic book for many, many years. I never read the original comics. It was all about the cartoon. The toy line I liked at first. The cartoon I liked at first, but then it went really silly really quick, and I kind of just stopped.
Yeah,
I get why people like it, but
it really is a winner. But my relationship with it was odd because I'd grown up with the comic books because my uncle owned a comic shop, so I had seen the much more adult-oriented version of it. It was a lot more violent, a lot darker. It just happened to be turtles, and then suddenly these toys show up. I hadn't seen the cartoon, and I'm like, "What in the hell?" Because you wouldn't think that they were targeting children with it, but clearly they'd rejigged the entire concept to be just about the kids market. And man, did it work. It was great.
And these original toys were sculpted by Mark Taylor, the same man who did the Masters of the Universe sculpt, which is why they look very familiar. And they're just beautiful. Those first 4 turtle figures are great. Let's address this. Zizzle says woke movies on nostalgia are bad. We said that a few times. Woke is destroying childhoods. I don't talk too much about politics on here. I'll just say that I don't think anything is destroying our childhoods. You know, if we're going to talk about Star Wars, no matter what happens, you still, if you just like the first trilogy, you still have that. Do you know what I mean? You can feel free to not like anything that comes out. It shouldn't steal or destroy anything that you had. You still have those memories, right? You don't have to be a fan of what comes out now, but woke stuff I don't talk about on here. So sorry,
it's too messy. It's too charged, and it's kind of heartbreaking all at the same time. So it's not fun to talk about.
Yeah, it's not. So Turtles should be on here. Should they be number 1? Jordan, you tell us from what you remember from a sales point of view. Was this the biggest seller in your years at Toys R Us?
I don't know. I think He-Man's too far down on the list. I don't think I would put Turtles as number one. I might. It would come down to Joe and He-Man for me.
For the biggest sellers, yeah. I don't think anything beat GI Joe. I remember GI Joe being huge for so long. Like that original, well, the Real American Hero line went to 94 was the last year. Batman, that was a small little Toy Biz line.
No,
I'd say
it was a massive hit too, and it
I'd
ran
say
for
small.
yeah,
Yeah, I take it back. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. But I remember Masters of the Universe being bigger than Turtles. In the time that I was there, it had a bigger footprint in the aisle, and it was generally a hotter mover for the first at least 3 years or so. And then Turtles came in and kind of cannibalized some of its market because they were targeting very similar age category. But I remember Masters being a bigger deal than even Turtles.
Interesting. Interesting. There you have it. There's a top 10. That was great. Love that. Nope. Nope. No Legos for me as a kid cost too much. We were talking about M.A.S.K, and M.A.S.K really reminded me of Lego because they were tiny and they're expensive. Like the one you were talking about, Condor. I think we looked back. It was like $19 back then, or something
No,
crazy. Not $19. No.
it would have been. Let's see here. Most figures were $6, $7, and it would have been maybe 10 or 11.
Oh, okay. So I'm probably thinking of Thunderhawk or something a little bit more bigger, maybe.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thunderhawk would have been around 20, something like that.
Okay. So when did you leave Toys R Us?
I don't remember exactly when. I got super sick and had to retire. Won't get into that story. And I was on my back for a couple of years, and then I came back and joined Canada's biggest toy chain at that point called Toys and Wheels, and I became a store manager for them.
Oh my God. In Westmount.
Yeah, they had almost 100 stores at the high point of their lifespan, and then I became I was hired as an assistant manager because of my experience at TRU, and then I became a store manager and became their setup and teardown guys, and that was fun because they would send me to places to build new stores or tear down old ones and train all the staff and stuff like that. Like setting up a brand new store for the first time was cool, and they'd fly me
Right.
all over to do that.
That's fun. Yeah. Toys and Wheels. I haven't thought about that. There's a few Leisure World. I remember that one.
Leisure World was right above us in Westmount, directly above us.
Pinocchio. Pinocchio
Pinocchio's, yeah.
toys. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember all those.
So so TRU was the big box, right? But and Toys and Wheels was more like KB for our American friends. They were like the ones in the malls.
Right. Right. Wow. Okay, so walk us through that. Before we get into Jordan's story about his own toy store, don't forget, guys, to hit that like button. There's over 30 of you in the chat. If you do me a favor, that helps with the algorithm gods and it pleases them. So it'll push the video out. So please, we got to do it. So please do it right now. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay. So
Toys and Wheels died around 94, and I opened my store in 95.
why did you want to open a toy store? Where did this idea come from?
Well, I was getting pretty good at it, having spent like almost a decade in the industry. I knew how to display things. I knew how to sell things. I knew how to manage the store, schedules, all that kind of stuff. I was really good with the point of sale system and inventory control and all that. So I had a bunch of skills that would have just gone to waste otherwise. And I liked the toy industry. So when Toys and Wheels collapsed, the mall that one of the stores was in kind of panicked because they didn't know what they were going to fill that space with. And they knew that it was an important draw. At that point in history, having a toy store in the mall was a nice draw.
Right.
So I basically just went to the mall manager and I said, hey, I can do this, and then we just started negotiating me opening up my own store. So I had to come back with a business proposal. I had to go to the bank and blah, blah, blah. It took a few months to get all that sorted out. I borrowed way too much money, which ended up being the death knell of this entire project. I got in too much debt. I couldn't dig out of it. And then the debt servicing just started to strangle the company after year 4. So I had a 5-year run with my own toy chain. It was started with one, and I got up to three, and then the debt
Wow.
servicing. Yeah, the debt and the original arrangement for borrowing the money is what killed me. But it was also a rapidly changing environment, right? Brick and mortar retail stores were wobbling as the internet started to really take hold, and the entire toy industry was being used as a loss leader by the big chains. So, like Walmart had no interest in actually making a profit with toys. They just wanted to pull people in their doors, and that made
Right.
it real hard for independents to survive. So I had to carry everything but the Saturday morning and advertise toys because I couldn't make a profit on it. I looked crazy expensive with even just like a 10% markup. I looked like I was trying to steal from people. So I couldn't carry Lego. I couldn't carry the high profile toy lines. I tried, I bring them in on occasion, but I had to survive with the smaller companies and vintage toys.
So one of the first memories I have, and I've shopped at your store a lot, was I remember going in there and 95, 96 had to be.
Yep.
It was when the first wave of green cards of the Star Wars Power of the Force 2 came out. Going into your store and you had used toys. I was just like,
We didn't call them used, we called them vintage.
I know, how smart is that? But I was like, oh, they got the old Kenner ones, like. And I remember there was this, I'm not going to name his name, but there was a dealer who I'm sure you know who dealt in just vintage Star Wars toys in London. In fact, he still does to this day. And I kind of went into your store and I'm like, hey, I got all this stuff still. That's worth that much. And I'm like, the last wave, the 85 stuff, I didn't know a lot of that stuff came out because it was really hard to find. And this guy and you had Stormtrooper Luke. I was like, they made friggin' Stormtrooper Luke. What? Could see the tag on it. I'm like, oh, he probably would have been like what, $50 back then, maybe something like that. But
I don't
he's
remember.
like 300-400 now. But
Yeah, I don't recall. Impossible Pie is asking what the name of the store was. It was called Cool Toys. That was the name, and it had a very colorful logo, which I designed myself with an exclamation mark on the end of it. Cool Toys. Yeah, we had a good run. We had a good, nice 5-year run. And in the original store in the Westmount Mall, we had a nice. I don't know how long that cabinet was, but we had a really pro-looking 8-foot cabinet, glass doors on it, and all the most expensive stuff would be behind glass. And we got pretty good at telling the story behind the line, and that got
right,
people excited. We used to experiment with that. Like one of my favorite experiments was that we would bring in toys, and it was part of the Toy Biz line was the one I'm thinking of, the Lex Luthor figure that would punch itself in the face.
yeah,
It
yeah,
just uses like
yeah,
so literally one of the worst figures ever designed. I would put one behind glass with a light on it, and I would tell the story, worst action figure ever designed, and then a little bit of a blurb below it. And all the rest of them would be hanging on a regular hook in the aisle. And $20 on the one behind glass, $6 on the one in the aisle. And I would sell all of them went out the cabinet. Everybody wanted the one with the story behind it, and nobody cared about the one in the aisle.
that's amazing.
I didn't do that too often. I don't want to sound like I was a pirate, but I was really interested in how much the story mattered to people, and it really, really did. Yep, I had one in London, and actually I had two in London eventually, and I had one in St. Thomas. Um, and yeah, so the vintage stuff was really, really cool, and it became a routine for me to meet people at the front of the store on Saturdays. They'd walk in with boxes of stuff out of their basement, attic, and I would just go through it and piece things together and say, okay, I'll give you this much for it. And my formula was real easy. I would give it half of whatever book value was at that moment,
Right.
and then I would mark it up and get the other half retail. And everybody was happy for it. Like the parents were thrilled because they just thought it was a box of junk. And occasionally I would find things in there that were crazy, like a vinyl cape Jawa underneath a fabric cape. That's one thing. I just took a bunch of. I'll never forget that day. And so I took the fabric cape off to kind of clean it, and the vinyl cape was underneath it, and it was perfect. And I was like, "Holy snap!" But we got stuff like that a lot. There was this weird collector. I mean, an odd person that would come down from Northern Ontario, with a box full of stuff every once in a while once he knew I was there. And he brought in a full set of mint boxed Mego Kiss dolls.
Oh,
Like things you would never see. And one of the
yeah.
biggest Kiss collectors in Canada lived in our hometown.
Yes, I know him. Yep.
And he had just come from a Kiss convention in Toronto
Yep.
where he said nobody had a complete set of boxes because the instruments were on the back, so they would cut them all out so the band could hold them. You destroy the boxes like immediately. So he walked in. Now we'll never forget that moment either. He got like 4 feet onto the carpet and could tell what was behind the glass, and he did a spit take. And he didn't even go over and look at them any closer. He was still about 15 feet away from them. He did a 90-degree turn and walked right over to me, and he said, "Do not sell those. I will be back in 20 minutes."
Wow.
And he went right to the bank, and it was somewhere around $800 or $1,000 that we were asking for them. And he happily threw the money in my face and ran away giggling because they were super rare. So those kind of moments made the store what it was, and I love that kind of stuff.
Vickman has a question. Feel free to answer if you like. Oh, right there.
Oh, what percentage of the final price goes to the toy store? Okay, again, that depends on the line.
Let's say the Power of the Force 2 when you got a case of the latest wave.
Well, I don't remember the exact numbers there, but I can tell you the exact numbers on Hot Wheels, just as an example of how hard it was when all the other chains were using the toy department as a loss leader. And that, if you're not familiar with that term, that means that you sell at a loss on purpose just to draw people inside. So when I bought Hot Wheels, they were selling for 97 cents a piece at Walmart, and I paid 99 cents a piece for them.
Wow.
Every toy line that appeared on TV, I had that problem with. And I would try to have a markup of 40%, but I could not do that on anything that was TV advertised. If you could get 10 out of it, you were lucky. And most often, the really high profile stuff, the most popular stuff, was being sold negative. And Toys R Us and Walmart and those guys could do it because they had kickback kind of arrangement with the suppliers of the toys. So they would get bonuses, they would get credit assigned to them based on the volume of merchandise that they turned over. So if they cranked out a ton of Star Wars toys, then Hasbro would give them a credit towards their next season's buying purchase.
Oh.
So even though in the moment they were selling it at a loss, they could recoup that stuff based on the volume that they were selling, which I was never, ever going to be able to compete with. So it was really, really stacked in the favor of the big chains. And it was impossible to make a living selling TV toys like Lego. I wanted Lego desperately. I tried and I just could not make it work. And people would come in and, wag their finger at me and call me a pirate because I was just trying to get a 10% markup on something.
And you can't sit there and have a 10-minute conversation with every person about why it is the way it is, right?
No, but it will really hurt your reputation. So we had to avoid that stuff. It was like a minefield. Some things we pulled out, but we got into the rare stuff. We brought in lines from Europe, smaller stuff, a lot more kind of educational stuff. That's where most of the store survived. And then the vintage cabinets. So that was a weird combination for a toy store. The parents were happy with all the stuff that we had in the main aisles, and the kids and then the fathers typically would go over and just like glue their face against the cabinet and talk about Kiss dolls and $6 Million Man dolls and Battlestar Galactica dolls.
Honey, come here. I used to play with this. Yeah. Good morning, Matt. How you doing, buddy? Good to see you, mate. Severus is here. Good to see you. Broke a few speed limits getting back. Collector Con, you're Jordan. You chat on the topic. Appreciate that, brother.
Yes, thank you, sir. I'm glad you got home safe.
Great. And yeah, what'd you get? Anything good? Throw it in there if you did. So I remember getting, this story, Jordan. I'll tell everybody though. There used to be a company, I don't know if they're still around now, that used to make replica. At the time, they were really great. Star Wars helmets. They were called Dawn Post, and obviously they made more than that. I got my Dawn Post Boba Fett helmet from Jordan back in the day, and it was like $5,000 or something crazy. It was over $100.
Yeah,
I remember saving like my entire check, and I remember like I was gonna, what I was gonna do? I'm gonna tell you an embarrassing story. Oh my god, we talked about the early 90s being the dark time for Star Wars because it was just the novels. Really, that was it. So I remember reading one about Jason and Jaina, and I think it was a young adult novel, and how they were going to get a birthday present for their dad, Han, right? And they were going to find a birthday present, but the pesky Boba Fett was chasing them throughout the star system. It was one of those books. I was determined as soon as I found that Boba Fett helmet that I was going to shoot that movie. I was going to turn that story.
That's great.
Do you know how far I got? That I got the Boba Fett helmet. That's as far as I got.
Yeah, then it would have become apparent very quickly that that's a lot harder than you thought it was. Yeah.
Well, I got I got like how many pieces in the Boba Fett costume? Probably like 30. Oh, I got the helmet. We're on our way. We're on our way. It never happened, but
yeah, I remember those. It was nice bringing those in. We were dealing with the smaller independent kind of suppliers and resins and replicas. We did a few of that stuff. We were bringing in phasers and communicators for the Trekkies. Yeah, some nice stuff. We had some replica lightsabers too, briefly. Not too much of that stuff because we didn't want it to get crazy expensive. But
I bought one off your uncle from his store, which is Comic Book Collector, and it wasn't a licensed one. It was one that had been made.
Yeah,
right. And
made locally, I think. Yeah,
I still have it today. It kind of looks like Obi-Wan's and Jedi Luke's, which is very similar anyway. It kind of looks like that, but has like rubber on it and stuff. Obviously made from just parts from whatever store, right?
Yeah.
But I remember going into his store and it was like yours, where you would see Star Wars stuff that you wouldn't see anywhere else. And I remember buying it off your uncle. And I was like, oh my God, this is like the best thing. I still have it.
Yeah, we really tried hard to offer things that you couldn't find anywhere else so that we would be a destination. And that was the only way you could survive, because we were literally 10 feet away from Zellers, which is another big Walmart like chain in Canada, or was. It's dead now too. Wow, yeah, that entire industry just has caved in. But I can remember trying to find opportunities to sell stuff that people in Canada hadn't seen before. We would get in a car, in my minivan at that point. I had an all-wheel drive Mazda MPV 5-speed minivan, which people tell me they didn't make, but I had one. It was really rare, good for the winter and everything. I would drive down into the States. We'd go into Michigan or Ohio, and we'd raid KB Toys for their Aliens toy line, which never came to Canada.
Yep.
And it was in the clearance bins. And we would buy every figure they had. It didn't matter. We would buy garbage bags full of Aliens figures, and we'd bring them back and put them on a hook in our store for just the regular price.
Wow.
And everybody was happy. I was thrilled because I was making actual good margins on it. The buyers were happy because they couldn't get it in Canada. And it was a nice line. You know, it wasn't the greatest line ever, but it was a nice, solid line. And we did that for an entire year, just raiding every KB we could.
Did you ever go yard sailing?
No,
like for your store, like since the vintage stuff started to pick up in your store and you were kind of getting known for that, did you ever go Saturday morning yard sailing to pick this stuff?
No time.
No.
Like I spent a lot of, especially when I got up to 3 stores, I was working all the time. But we made it known to people that they could bring stuff to us, and that happened a lot, which was really fun.
Yeah, you were first for that. I often talk about Brom, who's the owner of Heroes, and when he took over Heroes in the year 2000, the first thing he did was he had used Joes and used Joe vehicles. And I remember Rob and I going in there being like, kind of half joking, like, "Oh, good luck with that." Like, no one wants that stuff, right?
Yeah. Like very recently, they still had one of my Cool Toys bagged figures in there.
Yes. Yeah. I feel embarrassed because I have the one that you gave me for Action Figure Adventure, the EV99 with the tag. I was gonna bring it, but I'm not gonna run downstairs now and leave you here hanging. So, but I still have that, and it's
we would take the Ziploc baggies and we'd make our own custom headers for it with our logo on it that said Cool Toys, and then we'd have a little price tag. And again, a story if there deserved to be one, and we had a lot of fun with that stuff.
Jacort series says, that warm feeling of nostalgia seeing that Toys R Us song. I do have the trailer or one of their, I'll play like 2 seconds of it, but I don't want to get like copyright strikes, but that's all we're getting. That's all you're getting.
Yeah. When I was there, we all wore the orange vest. They moved on from the vest to a smock, like the kind you'd see in an ice cream parlor.
Yeah.
When I was working there, it was the vest with the gigantic embroidered patch of Jeffrey on the back of it, and it said Jeffrey on the bottom of it, which was hysterical because people would regularly walk up to me and say, "Excuse me, Jeffrey, could you tell me where this is?" And my cousin and I worked there for the first season together. He didn't last long. I went on for years, but he got shit canned pretty quick for being a shit disturber. But we entertained ourselves by wearing name tags with different names on them.
So punk rock, along with the blue hair. Look at
And
you.
I didn't have blue hair now. They would never let me do that. But so he chose the name Grady, named after the dim-witted neighbor on the Sanford and Son.
Yes.
And he wanted to be Grady, and I chose the name Elvis.
That's why Rob was saying that in the chat earlier. Okay.
And I loved it when people would come in and ask the front desk if Elvis was working today.
So good.
It was awesome.
That's amazing. I love it. I want to thank you, my friend, for once again hanging out with me, talking about the kind of crap we love to talk about. Very kind of you to take time out of your Sunday. Did you want to plug anything? Now's your time. If you want to.
Well, I mean, the Mr. Dress Up doc is there and on Amazon for anybody that's interested in the history and cultural impact of one of Canada's most beloved TV shows ever, our Mr. Rogers, if you will. We're very proud of that one.
Hey, Morgan.
It's my sister, Morgan, checking in. Otherwise, my day-to-day job is to just coach and train new and emerging screenwriters and helping them find their voice and tell good stories, which is what a lot of what we've been talking about today, how to actually understand the fundamentals of good storytelling. And I'm hoping that they will go on to create some better stuff for us to enjoy in later years.
Uh-oh.
For me, I think I'm done. I don't think I'm going to spend the time watching any more series from any of the four corners of Disney, which is Star Wars, Marvel, Pixar, and Disney Animation. At this point, I think I'm done.
So Jordan and I did Boba Fett, and we did Obi-Wan. Yeah, so for me, yeah, I'm with Jordan. Obviously I'm not done caring because I still talk about it, but I feel nothing now. And more importantly, I don't want to spend $24.99 on Disney Plus. I think if you don't like the content, the best thing you can do is not pay for it. And I think too many people still subscribe to whatever because one day they might want to watch Mandalorian. It's like, you don't have to do that. I think Acolyte looks terrible. I think it might be the worst one out of all of them because there's nothing in that trailer that I saw that was Star Wars.
Well, we could get into just the fundamentals of storytelling and everything that's not really doesn't appear to be present in these later projects. But I don't say this to be mean-spirited because I want everybody to enjoy what they enjoy. I respect that for sure. But if you want to see a change in Disney because you're unhappy, if that's true, then don't give them your money because they don't care whether you like it or you hate it. If you're watching it, then they're getting what they need out of it. Yeah. So the only way that you're going to have them kind of steer into a different direction is to hurt them in their wallets. That's it. That's the only thing they're going to listen to.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, Mo says I still love Star Wars, but some of the shows were not great. I did really like Andor, but my wife did not.
That's understandable. I loved Andor, but I completely understand why people didn't like it because that's a Star Wars story in a completely different genre. So it doesn't look and feel like the Star Wars fantasy adventure movies that we grew up with. It is not that. But it's also arguably the best quality show that they've produced.
And Severus, yeah, I would love to do it, but
there's just too many other people out there bitching about it. So
I don't want to be that negative. Like, I get comments here and there when I say something about a figure when we're doing our verses and I slam it. I get people like I've had people unsub from me because I gave my opinion. So I just I don't want to be totally negative all the time about something, right? And I know that everything I saw from that trailer is nothing that I want to invest in.
Well, there's no satisfaction in just kind of harping on it. I like in conversation with you and friends of mine, sure, that's one thing, but broadcasting it just doesn't feel right for me. So I agree with you.
And we did that with Boba Fett and Obi-Wan, and it was really, if you go back, it was really Dave was with us too, but we
It
didn't
was
really
kind of
have.
fun. It was novel at that point, and I actually still remember fondly our flashback to tank pun. The flashback to that was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's fun to rip things apart, but after a while, it just becomes a weight that I don't want to carry around.
Yeah, at some point you got to let it go. And hopefully the next generation or the next generation of Star Wars fans like this stuff. Like there was a whole generation grew up with the prequels and that's theirs. There's a whole generation that hopefully grew up with the sequels and that's theirs. And I think we need to pass on what we have learned, right? We need to really do that. We need to pass it on. And whatever happens from then on, it's not our responsibility. You know what I mean? Like we got to let it go. We got to let it go, man.
And the great stuff will always survive. The real test is time, right? That's the ultimate test. And the best stuff will always survive. And some of the stuff that we're complaining about will likely disappear and get shuffled aside eventually, and maybe even pretty quick.
I agree. It's, yeah, like the most disliked Star Wars trailer in history. So, like, if you look at the dislikes, it's almost over half of the likes in the hundreds of thousands. I mean, that's not good. So, and it's got nothing to do with the agendas that people are saying. To me, it's more like it just doesn't. There's too many contradictions that erase what happened in the prequels, and you're just breaking things now at this point for the sake of what? For someone to get into the role of writing, and now I get to play with the Star Wars toys, and this is what I want them to do. That's the way I see it. So, right or wrong, that's how I see it.
It was right, like classically, Star Wars has always been about the struggle between good and evil, and they just state proudly at the beginning of that trailer, "This is not about good and evil." So
Yeah.
they again, this is fundamental. I don't care if it's Star Wars or Marvel or what it is. This is fundamental storytelling basics 101, and there's this weird kind of moral ambiguity that's kind of seeping into things now. So nobody's a good guy, nobody's a bad guy. You don't need to have a redemptive arc anymore. You can justify almost anything. Characters can do anything. Like it's really boring. So that's more the reason why I'm not interested in it, is because it's not these really powerful archetypal type of stories that resonate with us and have for thousands of years, for that matter. Like the stories that were built using the same principles that mythology was built with, which is why they resonate with everybody everywhere for thousands of years. These new kinds of stories, I don't even know what they are. They're just what we would call a series of events, but they're not a story. Anyway, rant over. My old man Denitis is acting up.
No, it's all good. So Severus, oh, thanks. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I can't remember to who a few minutes ago, we still have that stuff that we love. And if you love the original, the prequels, whatever you love, you could still love it, right? We don't have to digest and love everything that's fed to us. And I think you just got to fight that nostalgia, right? It's not about a lightsaber. It's not about even the Falcon. It's about the characters. The characters make the world what it is.
The story, man. The
Story.
story.
The story.
And
Yes.
even though nobody likes to talk about it, we're talking about universal themes. The effective deployment of universal themes that makes everybody feel something. And it's not there. It's hollow.
It is. But on a happier note, I need to refill my cup. I'm almost out. So I want to thank all you guys for joining us. And I'm going to coax Jordan back at some point to talk about this further and Star Wars. I don't know if it'll be, probably won't be an acolyte thing, but just to talk about this in general, I think it's.
I've got some really good Toys R Us war stories I can tell you.
There you go. yeah, we'll have Jordan back for sure to talk about that. And I want to thank you, my friend, for hanging out with me on a Sunday. I really appreciate it. Taking time out of your busy schedule to hang out.
My pleasure. I appreciate everyone else coming as well and listening in. Yeah, I hope everybody has a great day.
Take care, guys. We'll see you on the next stream, and go get yourself a coffee. Cheers, everyone.